The Galactic Military Academy had exactly one tradition that made grown warriors weep. And it was not, as you might expect, the cafeteria food. Though that was a close second. It was called the Endurance Protocol, and it had a failure rate that would make a statistics professor need therapy. Instructor Vrel stood before the assembled cadets, all 6 of his legs planted firmly on the ground in what his species considered a power stance. To the humans who'd seen it, it looked like he was bracing for an earthquake, but nobody had the heart to tell him. His carapace gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the auditorium, and his mandibles clicked together in what might have been anticipation or possibly just gas. Hard to tell with his species. "The Endurance Protocol," he announced, his voice amplified through the translation matrix, "separates the warriors from the whiners. 72 hours, no breaks, no mercy. 40% of you will fail." He paused for dramatic effect, which was somewhat undermined by the nervous chittering from the squib section and the smell of fear pheromones wafting from the Kelton cadets. "Questions?" A hand shot up. Human hand. Of course. Instructor Vrel's compound eyes swiveled to focus on Marcus Webb, the human exchange cadet who had been a consistent source of migraine-inducing confusion since his arrival 3 months ago. Marcus had the kind of face that suggested he found everything mildly amusing, including quantum physics exams and surprise combat drills. His dark hair was perpetually messy, and he had what the Academy psychologist had described in his file as an unsettling amount of enthusiasm for physical discomfort. "Yes, Cadet Webb. Are there snack breaks, or should I bring my own granola bars?" The auditorium went silent. You could have heard a pin drop, assuming pins made sounds in vacuum, which they did not, but you get the idea. Instructor Vrel's mandibles stopped clicking. "Did you?" he said slowly. "Just ask about snacks during the trial designed to push you to your absolute physical and psychological limits?" "Yeah, 72 hours is a long time. I usually eat every few hours. Gets a bit wonky otherwise, you know. Low blood sugar, gets all shaky." Marcus demonstrated by wiggling his fingers. Sitting next to Marcus was Krieg, a Bronthal warrior who stood 7 feet tall and had muscles on his muscles. His species had conquered 12 star systems through sheer intimidation and creative threats. Krieg leaned over, his voice a deep rumble. "Human, you cannot be serious. The Endurance Protocol is legendary. My own father barely survived it. He still has nightmares." "Oh, I'm taking it seriously," Marcus said cheerfully. "That's why I'm asking about snacks. Can't perform well on an empty stomach." Sports Science 101. On Marcus's other side sat Pip, a flitter whose species had hollow bones and could technically fly in low-gravity environments. Pip's feathers were already puffing up in stress, and the trial had not even started yet. "We're all going to die," Pip whispered. "We're going to die, and they'll use our failures as teaching examples." "Dude, relax," Marcus said, giving Pip what he probably thought was a reassuring pat, but nearly knocked the small alien off his seat. "It's just a fitness challenge. How bad can it be?" Behind them, Talon bubbled something in his aquatic suit. The translation came through tinny and warbled. "My species has a saying, pride comes before the drowning." "That's dark, man," Marcus said. "You guys okay? You seem stressed." Instructor Vrel slammed a foreclaw on the podium. "There will be no snacks, Cadet Webb. There will be no breaks. There will only be pain, exhaustion, and the crushing weight of your own limitations. Do I make myself clear?" "Crystal," Marcus said, giving a thumbs up, which meant nothing to 90% of the species present, and was mildly offensive to the other 10%. "So I should definitely bring granola bars. Got it." Instructor Vrel made a sound like a kettle achieving sentience and immediately regretting it. The trial would begin at dawn cycle. The cadets were dismissed to prepare, which for most species meant writing farewell messages to their families and making peace with their gods. Marcus went for a light jog around the academy grounds because, in his words, he needed to loosen up. Medical Officer Nira watched him through her office window, her scales shifting colors in confusion. Her species, the creche, were empaths who could sense physical distress in other beings. Right now she sensed nothing from the human except what could only be described as vibes, good vibes, inexplicably good vibes for someone about to enter 72 hours of orchestrated suffering. "There's something wrong with that one," she muttered to her assistant, a nervous squib named Jix. Wrong how? Jix asked. I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. She pulled up Marcus's medical file, which was surprisingly boring. No cybernetic enhancements, no genetic modifications, no parasitic organisms granting super strength. Just a human. A baseline. Standard issue human who jogged for fun and thought granola bars were appropriate crisis supplies. Instructor Vrel stood in the training center, running final diagnostics on the obstacle courses. Each section had been carefully designed to exploit the weaknesses of multiple species simultaneously. High gravity zones for the light worlders, low oxygen sections for the heavy breathers, spatial reasoning puzzles that required full cognitive function, which nobody would have after hour 20. It was perfect, it was brutal, it was necessary, and somewhere in the back of his mind a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, they should have researched human endurance capabilities a little more thoroughly before accepting exchange cadets. But that was ridiculous. How different could one species really be? Dawn Cycle arrived with all the cheerfulness of a tax audit. The cadets assembled at the starting line, 73 beings from 42 different species, all looking like they were waiting for their execution, which, in a metabolic sense, was not entirely inaccurate. Marcus was stretching. Actually stretching, doing these weird lunges that made his joints pop in ways that caused several nearby cadets to flinch. You know that sound is unsettling, right? Krieg muttered, his confidence from yesterday considerably diminished now that reality was setting in. Oh, sorry, dude. It's just my knees. They always crack in the morning. Marcus grabbed his foot behind him, pulling it up to his back. Gotta get the quads loose. Pip was vibrating. Just completely vibrating with anxiety, feathers standing on end. I didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about all the ways I could fail. Aw man, that sucks, Marcus said. I slept great. Got a solid 8 hours. Really important for recovery, you know? Talon's translator crackled. How are you this calm? Do humans not fear death? We fear it, Marcus said thoughtfully. We just also do triathlons and marathons and this thing called CrossFit, so, you know, perspective. Nobody knew what any of those words meant, but they sounded ominous. Instructor Vrel's voice boomed across the starting area. Cadets, the next 72 hours will test every fiber of your being. You will encounter physical challenges that defy your evolution. Mental puzzles that mock your intelligence. Exhaustion that will make you question your very existence. The only rule is this: you can quit at any time, but if you quit, you fail. Begin. The horn sounded and chaos erupted. The first obstacle was a climbing wall in 1.5 gravity. For context, most of the species present had evolved in 1 gravity or less. This was like asking a human to climb a wall while wearing a backpack full of bricks, except the backpack was their own body, and the bricks were existential dread. Krieg, despite his impressive musculature, was struggling immediately. His species, the Bronthal, were ambush predators. They'd evolved to explode into brief bursts of terrifying violence and then take a nice nap. Sustained effort was not their thing. Marcus went up the wall like a caffeinated spider. How? Krieg wheezed from 3 holds below. How are you doing that? Rock climbing gym back home, Marcus called down. Did it every Thursday. This is actually easier because the holds are bigger. He reached the top, rang the bell, and rappelled down while humming something that translated loosely as I will survive, which felt like targeted psychological warfare. The next section was a 5-kilometer run through varied terrain. By kilometer 2, half the cadets were walking. By kilometer 3, Pip had to be reminded that flying was against the rules, even though, technically, my people invented flight before most of you invented fire, so this seems discriminatory. Marcus was jogging. Not sprinting, not struggling, just jogging at a pace that suggested this was a pleasant Tuesday morning activity. Instructor Vrel watched from the monitoring station, his mandibles clicking in what might have been confusion or possibly a minor stroke. Why is he humming? He asked nobody in particular. Medical officer Nira checked her readouts. His heart rate is elevated but stable, breathing regular, core temperature nominal. By all physiological markers, he's barely exerting himself. That's impossible. The gravitational variance alone should be causing micro tears in his muscle tissue. Should be, yes. Nira's scales rippled. Isn't. By hour 12, the pattern was clear and deeply disturbing. Krieg had developed what he insisted was a strategic cramp in his primary leg cluster, and was limping through obstacles while muttering about honor and ancestors. Pip kept trying to perch on things to rest, forgetting that the sensors would immediately flag any break longer than 10 seconds. Talon's mobility suit was making concerning grinding noises, and the fluid levels were dropping faster than anticipated. Marcus was on his second lap of the obstacle course, his second lap. For fun. Cadet Webb. Instructor Vrel's voice crackled over the comms. What are you doing? Marcus looked up, locating the nearest camera. Oh, hey, yeah. I finished the required circuit, but we've got like 60 hours left, and I didn't want to just stand around, so I figured I'd do some extra reps. Keep the muscles warm, you know? Active recovery and all that. Silence from the comms. Then, you finished the required circuit, so you decided to do it again. Well, yeah. I mean, what else am I gonna do? You said no breaks. Instructor Vrel turned to Nira. I want a full genetic scan. He's been modified. He has to have been modified. I already ran 3 scans, Nira said, her scales now flashing colors associated with confusion and mild panic. He's completely baseline for his species. No enhancements, no augmentations, no cybernetics. That's just what humans are. That cannot be what humans are. And yet, by hour 20, the Academy staff had started a betting pool. Not about whether Marcus would fail, that ship had sailed, sunk, and been forgotten by maritime history. No. They were betting on whether he'd actually show signs of fatigue before the 72 hours were up. The current odds were not in favor of fatigue. Krieg finally collapsed at hour 22, his massive frame crumpling like a disappointing souffle. I fought with honor, he declared to nobody in particular. My ancestors will sing of this day. You tripped over a foam roller, Pip wheezed from nearby. Honorably tripped. There's a difference. Medical teams retrieved Krieg, who insisted on being carried out on a stretcher despite being physically capable of walking, because drama is important for the narrative. Marcus jogged past, gave them a friendly wave, and continued humming. Pip looked at Talon. Talon's suit bubbled ominously. We're not going to make it, are we? Pip asked. Nope. At least we'll fail together. Statistically probable, yes. Marcus passed them again, now on his third bonus lap, and called out, You guys doing okay? Need anything? Death, Pip responded. Sweet, merciful death. Aw, don't be like that, you're doing great, really digging deep. Marcus gave them a double thumbs up and jogged backward for a few steps to maintain eye contact. Mind over matter and all that. After he was out of earshot, Pip turned to Talon. I hate him. Understandable. I mean, I respect him, but also I hate him. The duality of cadet relationships. Hour 24 arrived like a cruel joke. The cadets were required to complete a memory and spatial reasoning test, which would have been challenging when well rested. After 24 hours of continuous physical exertion and zero sleep, it was essentially asking concussed people to perform brain surgery on themselves. Pip fell asleep during the test. Just fully dozed off, face planted on the data pad, a small puddle of drool forming under his beak. Talon's suit translated what might have been sobbing or possibly just aggressive bubble sounds. Marcus finished the test in 12 minutes, which was 8 minutes faster than the Academy record, stood up and asked if he could go do some pull-ups while waiting for everyone else to finish. Instructor Vrel stared at the test results. Perfect score. Not just passing, perfect. Every question correct, every spatial puzzle solved, and according to the biometric data, his cognitive function had not decreased at all. This is day 1, Vrel said quietly. We have 2 more days of this. Nira placed a claw on his shoulder. I've contacted Earth's military liaison, asked for information on human training protocols. And? They haven't stopped laughing long enough to respond. Instructor Vrel made a sound like grinding gravel and shattered dreams. Hour 26 marked the first major dropout wave. 37 cadets, more than half the starting group, had voluntarily withdrawn. They cited various reasons: muscle failure, cognitive impairment, spiritual crises, and in one memorable case a Pelthon cadet who claimed his ancestors were deeply disappointed, and he needed to go meditate about his life choices. And nobody blamed them. In fact, the remaining cadets looked at the dropouts with the kind of envy usually reserved for lottery winners and people who'd never heard of the academy. The high-gravity endurance zone had been activated. 1.8 gravity now, which was getting into "why do my bones feel like they are personally attacking me" territory for most species. Marcus was doing lunges, actually doing lunges with his hands behind his head, humming what the translation matrix identified as "Eye of the Tiger," which several staff members had looked up and were now deeply concerned about. Apparently humans had an entire music genre dedicated to voluntary suffering, which explained so much and yet raised even more questions. Krieg had been relocated to the medical bay, where he was receiving IV fluids and complaining loudly about the unfair advantages of Death World species, which was rich coming from someone whose people had conquered systems through intimidation. "It's not natural," Krieg insisted to anyone who'd listen. "Humans are small, squishy. They should not be able to do this." Medical Officer Nira, currently running her 4th round of tests on Marcus's blood samples, made a non-committal sound. "Define natural." "You know what I mean. Look at them. They're built like prey animals. No armor plating, no redundant organs, no venom sacs. They shouldn't be the ones still going." "And yet," Nira said, which was becoming her favorite phrase, "here we are." The current survivor count was down to 12 cadets. Pip was somehow still going, though. Going was a generous term for what was essentially a controlled stumble from obstacle to obstacle. The little flitter's eyes had taken on a glazed quality that suggested his consciousness had left the building and autopilot had taken over. Talon's mobility suit was now making sounds that the maintenance crew described as deeply troubling and possibly haunted. The fluid levels were critical, and his movements had the jerky quality of a broken marionette. And then there was Marcus, who just asked Instructor Vrel if there was a pull-up bar he could use because upper body work is important for balanced fitness. Instructor Vrel had responded by walking away without a word, which was either Zen acceptance or the beginning of a nervous breakdown. The smart money was on breakdown. Hour 32 brought the psychological challenge section. Each cadet was placed in an isolation chamber and subjected to scenarios designed to test mental resilience. For most species, after 32 hours of exhaustion, this was where minds started doing interesting things like questioning reality and having conversations with furniture. Pip's session lasted 6 minutes before he started crying and asking if anyone had called his mom. Talon's translator kept repeating, "The void calls and I must answer," which was either profound or a sign that his suit's oxygen scrubbers needed maintenance. Marcus emerged from his 2-hour session looking thoughtful. "How was it?" asked the psychological evaluator, a Mentath named Krell whose species specialized in cognitive assessment. "Pretty interesting, actually. The scenario where you're trapped in a maze with shifting walls was clever. Reminded me of this escape room I did in Chicago. You guys ever done an escape room? Super fun. Great for team building." Krell's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, which in his species indicated profound confusion. "You found the psychological stress scenario fun?" "Well, yeah. I mean, once you realize the walls follow a pattern based on your movement speed, it's just problem solving. Took me about 20 minutes to map it out." Marcus stretched, his spine popping again in that way that made witnesses deeply uncomfortable. The sensory deprivation part was nice too. Gave me time to think. "Nice," Krell repeated slowly. "You found sensory deprivation nice." "Sure. Quiet, you know. Let me focus on my breathing." Actually nodded off for a bit, which was great because I was starting to feel a little tired. Krell made a note on his datapad. Human subject displays possible sociopathic tendencies or complete misunderstanding of the concept of stress. Recommend further study. From a safe distance. Hour 36 was when Medical Officer Nira made her discovery. She'd been analyzing Marcus's blood work, comparing it to the baseline samples from when he'd first arrived at the academy. What she found made her scales flash colors associated with scientific fascination and existential horror, which was a difficult combination to pull off. "Instructor Vrel," she called over comms. You need to see this. Vrel arrived in the medical bay, looking like he'd aged several years in the past day and a half. What now? Has he evolved a new organ? Developed telepathy? Achieved enlightenment? Worse. Nira pulled up the comparison charts. I found out why humans can do this. She displayed the data: muscle fiber composition, cardiovascular efficiency, thermoregulation systems, metabolic flexibility. It read like someone had designed a biological endurance machine and then decided to make it bipedal and give it thumbs. Humans, Nira explained, are persistence hunters. Their species evolved to chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until the prey literally died of exhaustion. They have more sweat glands than almost any other species in the galaxy. Their breathing is decoupled from their stride, unlike most quadrupeds. They can regulate their temperature independently of their activity level. And their brains produce chemicals that actually make sustained suffering feel good after a certain point. What? Vrel's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. They get high on pain, Nira clarified. After about an hour of sustained exertion, their brains start producing endorphins, which are natural opiates. They literally drug themselves into continuing. It's self-medicating insanity encoded into their evolutionary biology. That's horrifying. That's humanity. They both turned to watch the monitors where Marcus was currently helping Pip through an obstacle course, offering encouragement while simultaneously completing his own required tasks. He'd apparently decided that since he wasn't tired, he might as well help others. He doesn't even know he's terrifying, Vrel said quietly. That's what makes it worse. Hour 40 brought another revelation, this time from Earth's military liaison, who had finally stopped laughing long enough to send a response to Nira's inquiries about human training protocols. The message was brief. What you're describing is roughly equivalent to our basic training for non-combat personnel. If you want to see real human endurance, look up ultramarathon or Ironman triathlon. Good luck. You're going to need it. Nira looked up ultramarathon, then wished she hadn't. Humans, it turned out, voluntarily ran distances exceeding 100 miles. For fun. Some did it through deserts, some through mountains. Some apparently thought, 100 miles is too easy, let's do 200. There were events where humans ran for 24 hours straight, not to escape predators or reach safety, but to see who could cover the most distance. They had something called the Barkley Marathons, which had a 99% failure rate and was considered one of the hardest endurance events on Earth. And people signed up for it. On purpose. With money. They pay to do this, Nira said aloud, her voice hollow. They actually pay money to suffer. Krell, who'd wandered into the medical bay for coffee, looked at the data. That's it. Humans are insane. Clinically, definitively insane. They run a functional civilization, Nira pointed out. Insanity can be highly organized. Clearly. By hour 45, only 5 cadets remained in the trial. Marcus, obviously. Pip, who was no longer capable of speech and had been reduced to communicating through interpretive feather positioning. Talon, whose suit was now 60% prayer and 40% duct tape equivalent. And 2 cadets from hardy species who were technically still in the trial, but had entered what the medical staff were calling the philosophical acceptance phase of exhaustion, where they'd stopped trying to succeed and were simply existing in a state of mobile meditation. Marcus jogged past them, called out, "Looking strong, keep it up," and continued on to his next obstacle. One of the cadets, a Kelsh named Vorn, watched him go. "Do you think he knows he's not like other species?" The other cadet, Jorah, made a sound like wind through distant caves. "I think he thinks we're the weird ones. That's even more terrifying." Yup. Hour 48 arrived with all the fanfare of a dental appointment. Marcus completed his required circuit, helped Pip across a balance beam because the little flitter had forgotten how legs worked, and then asked Instructor Vrel if there were any bonus challenges available. Instructor Vrel, who had progressed from clicks to 1,000-yard stairs, just pointed at a climbing wall. "Cool, thanks." Marcus headed over and proceeded to set a new academy speed climbing record, while the monitoring staff watched in silence. Jix, Nira's assistant, finally voiced what everyone was thinking. Should we tell the incoming human exchange cadets that they're terrifying? Would it help? Nira asked. Probably not. Then no. Somewhere on the course, Pip finally collapsed, his body achieving what his mind had wanted 12 hours ago. Talon's suit gave up shortly after, though the exact cause of failure was listed as structural and possibly spiritual. The philosophical acceptance cadets withdrew at hour 49, citing enlightenment and a newfound understanding of their own mortality, which left Marcus, alone on the course, jogging laps, humming Earth songs about survival and glory, completely unaware that he'd accidentally revealed humans as the galaxy's most terrifying endurance predators. And they still had 24 hours to go. The emergency staff meeting was called at hour 50, which was either ironic or perfectly timed depending on your perspective regarding institutional panic. Instructor Vrel stood at the head of the conference table, looking like he'd spent the last 2 days questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. Around him sat the Academy's senior staff, Medical Officer Nira, Psychological Evaluator Krell, Commandant Thress, and various department heads who'd been woken up and told that humanity had become a problem. Gentlemen, ladies, beings of non-binary configuration, Vrel began, his mandibles clicking in a rhythm that suggested barely controlled hysteria. We have a situation. The human is still going, Commandant Thress said. It wasn't a question. The Commandant was a Zeraf, a species that valued mental acuity over physical prowess, which was a polite way of saying they were 3-foot-tall brains in mobility scooters. Thress's optical sensors swiveled to the main display, which showed Marcus doing what appeared to be burpees between obstacles. That's hour 50, he should be hallucinating by now. Should be, Nira confirmed. Isn't. His cognitive function is at 93% of baseline, which is actually higher than it was at hour 40. I think he's waking up. Several staff members made distressed sounds in their native languages, which the translation matrix wisely left untranslated. Let me summarize, Krell said, pulling up data on his pad. In the past 50 hours, Cadet Webb has completed the required course circuits, 17 times set 4 Academy speed records, helped 3 other cadets through obstacles, solved all psychological challenges in record time, and is currently showing no signs of physical or mental degradation. His exact words when asked how he felt were, and I quote, pretty good actually. Could go for a sandwich though. Did we? Commandant Thress asked slowly. Did we accidentally design our most challenging trial to be roughly equivalent to a human weekend hobby? The silence that followed was deafening, as Vrel pulled up historical data. The endurance protocol has been the Academy's ultimate test for 73 years. 40% average failure rate across all species. We've had cadets from high-gravity worlds collapse. We've had species with redundant organ systems tap out. 1 year, a Bronthal warlord's son quit at hour 30 and his father disowned him. And a human, Thress said, a baseline, unmodified human is treating it like a light workout. With, Nira added helpfully, a request for sandwiches. More distressed sounds. We have to stop this, someone said. Jix maybe, or possibly one of the other junior staff members who'd been roped into monitoring duty. We have to end the trial early. On what grounds? Vrel asked. That we designed it wrong? That we failed to research human physiology? That we're embarrassed? Yes, several voices responded simultaneously. Commandant Thress held up a manipulator appendage for silence. If we end the trial early, we admit that our most prestigious test is flawed. Every cadet who's ever failed will question the legitimacy of their failure. Every graduate who's ever succeeded will wonder if their achievement means anything. The political ramifications alone would be catastrophic. So we just let him keep going? Nira asked. For another 22 hours? Do we have a choice? Back on the course, Marcus was indeed wondering about sandwiches. Not in a delirious from hunger way, more in a, it's been a while since breakfast and I've burned a lot of calories way. He'd done the math in his head, a rough calculation based on his activity level, and figured he was probably down about 15,000 calories at this point. His body was definitely dipping into fat reserves, which was fine. He'd been meaning to lean out a bit anyway, but a sandwich would be nice. Maybe a club sandwich, with bacon, and some of those crispy fries. He completed another obstacle, a rope climb that would have challenged a fresh cadet. and barely registered as effort in his current state, and checked the course timer. Hour 52. Neat. 20 hours to go. Marcus paused to do some dynamic stretching. His muscles were definitely feeling it now, that deep ache that came from sustained use. Not pain exactly, more like his body reminding him that yes, this was still happening, and yes, he'd probably be sore tomorrow. But that was fine. Soreness meant growth. Adaptation. He'd done enough endurance events to know that the human body was weirdly good at this kind of thing. You just had to push through the discomfort, stay hydrated, and keep your mind occupied. He started humming again, working through his mental playlist of motivational songs. Don't Stop Believin' was always a good choice. Classic. Timeless. Really got you in the zone. From the monitoring station, Instructor Vrel watched this display with the kind of expression usually reserved for watching one's worldview crumble in real time. He's happy, Vrel said. 52 hours into the endurance protocol, and he's happy. Endorphins, Nira explained. His brain is flooding with them. He's essentially high right now. On his own neurochemistry. Correct. That's cheating. Evolution isn't cheating, it's just unfair. Hour 55 brought a new challenge, spatial reasoning puzzles that required manipulating three-dimensional objects with progressively more complex requirements. Fresh cadets typically needed 30 minutes per puzzle. Exhausted cadets either took hours or simply gave up. Marcus breezed through them in 45 minutes total, all 12 puzzles, while doing squats between each one because sitting still makes the lactic acid build up. The puzzle designers watched this performance with the kind of professional devastation usually reserved for artists watching their work used as coasters. I spent 3 years developing those puzzles. One of them, a Kix named Threll, said quietly. 3 years of cognitive research and difficulty balancing. They're very good puzzles, Nira offered. He solved the final one while upside down. What? He was doing a handstand. Said it increased blood flow to the brain, and he was right. His solution time actually improved. Nira added another note to her growing file labeled, Human Capabilities That Violate Common Sense. The file was now 17 pages long. Hour 58 marked the activation of the final course sections, the ones designed to be encountered when cadets were at their absolute lowest, mentally and physically destroyed, running on fumes and spite. High obstacles requiring full body coordination. Memory tests requiring immediate recall. Endurance challenges within the endurance challenge. Marcus approached the first obstacle, a 20-foot wall with minimal handholds, and assessed it with the practiced eye of someone who'd done this sort of thing before. Okay, he said to himself, loud enough for the microphones to catch. Definitely feeling it now. Arms are getting tired. Grip strength is probably down to 70%. Gotta compensate with leg drive. He proceeded to climb the wall using a technique that the Academy's climbing instructors immediately recognized as actually correct, and how we teach it to fresh cadets who haven't been awake for 58 hours. At the top, Marcus paused, taking in the view of the course below. Somewhere down there, medical teams were standing by, convinced he'd eventually collapse. Instructor Vrel was probably having some kind of crisis. The other cadets, the ones who'd dropped out, were probably sleeping or eating or doing literally anything else. And here he was, hour 58 of 72, still going. Marcus smiled. Not because he was sadistic or trying to prove anything. He smiled because somewhere deep in his evolutionary history, his ancestors had looked at prey animals and thought, I bet we could just follow that until it dies. And they'd been right. And that legacy, that absolutely unhinged approach to endurance, had been passed down through thousands of generations to him. Humans, he reflected, were kind of crazy when you thought about it. He climbed down the wall and jogged toward the next obstacle, humming Gonna Fly Now from Rocky, which the translation matrix identified and several staff members immediately looked up. The movie Rocky was about a human boxer who trained by running upstairs and punching meat. This was apparently considered normal and inspirational in human culture. They're all insane, Krell said, watching the monitors. The entire species. Functional insanity, Nira corrected. They run stable governments, create art, build civilizations. They're just also capable of running for days if properly motivated. What could possibly motivate someone to run for days? On the screen, Marcus completed another obstacle and pumped his fist in what the database identified as a gesture of personal encouragement. Pride, Nira said. Competition, the simple human desire to see if they can. Pick your motivation. They've got dozens. Hour 60 arrived like an old friend nobody wanted to see. Marcus performed his check-in at the monitoring station, required every 6 hours, where his vitals were assessed and he was given the opportunity to withdraw. "How you feeling, Cadet Webb?" asked the medical tech on duty, a young Pelthon who'd drawn the short straw for this shift. "Pretty good," Marcus said, rolling his shoulders. "Definitely tired. Lower back is a bit tight. Could probably use some electrolytes. But yeah, overall not bad. How much longer?" 12 hours. Cool. So like a half day. Totally doable." Marcus grabbed the offered water bottle, drank deeply, and handed it back. "Any chance there's food at the finish line? I'm thinking a really big meal, maybe pasta, carbs for recovery and all that." The tech checked his notes. Yes. There's traditionally a meal for those who complete the trial." "Awesome. Something to look forward to." Marcus did a few quick stretches. "All right, back to it. See you at hour 66. He jogged off, leaving the tech staring after him. "He's looking forward to hour 66, the tech said into his comm. "Someone please explain to me how that's possible." Nobody had an answer. Commandant Thress had made a decision. The trial would continue to its natural conclusion. But there would be changes. Oh yes, there would be changes. "Effective immediately," Thress announced to the assembled staff. "We will be implementing species-specific modifications to the endurance protocol. Human cadets will receive an adjusted version." "Adjusted how?" Vrel asked. "Longer, more challenging, possibly involving actual danger instead of simulated difficulty." Thress's optical sensors dimmed, which in Zareth body language indicated grim determination. "If humans can jog through our ultimate test while humming, then clearly we need to recalibrate our understanding of ultimate." "Are we sure we want to challenge them?" Nira asked carefully. "Because based on what I've learned about human culture, they might take that as encouragement." "Do we have a choice? The next human exchange class arrives in 3 months. 15 cadets. If they're all like Webb, we need to be prepared." The room fell silent as everyone contemplated 15 Marcus Webbs, all cheerfully destroying academy records and asking about snack breaks. "We're going to need a bigger medical bay," Nira said finally. "And more psychological support staff," Krell added. "And possibly," Vrel said quietly, "a new career. One far from humans and their terrifying biology." Hour 62 was when Marcus started helping with the cleanup. Not because he was asked, not because it was required, but because he'd noticed that the obstacle course equipment was going to need disassembly soon, and he was just standing around anyway, and might as well make himself useful. The maintenance crew watched in stunned silence as a cadet who'd been active for 62 straight hours began efficiently breaking down obstacle sections, moving equipment, and organizing materials. "Should we stop him?" asked one of the crew, a squib named Wren. "I don't know how," responded the supervisor, a grizzled Kelsh named Vorth. "He's being helpful, aggressively helpful." Marcus finished coiling a rope with the kind of precision that suggested muscle memory, set it with the other equipment, and jogged over. "Hey, you guys need anything else moved? I've got time." "You," Vorth said slowly. "You have been awake and active for 62 hours. Yep. And you want to help us do our jobs. I mean, if you don't need help, that's cool. Just thought I'd offer. Idle hands and all that." Vorth looked at Wren. Wren looked at Vorth. They both looked at Marcus, who was doing these weird, bouncing movements that the database identified as staying loose. "The universe," Vorth said, "has no mercy." "Is that a yes or a no on the help?" Marcus asked. Commandant Thress arrived at the monitoring station at hour 65, which was either unfortunate timing or morbid curiosity. Probably both. "Status report," Thress demanded. Instructor Vrel gestured at the monitors with the kind of defeated motion usually reserved for showing someone the ruins of your hopes and dreams. "He's reorganizing the equipment storage area. Says the current system is inefficient." "I'm sorry, what?" Hour 65. He's reorganizing storage. Because he's bored. Thress's optical sensors focused on the screen, where Marcus was indeed creating a new organizational system, complete with labels he'd made from spare materials. The human was humming something the translation matrix identified as working for the weekend, which felt like some kind of cosmic joke. Has he slept at all? Thress asked. No. Eaten? Water and electrolyte supplements only, as per trial rules. Shown any signs of decreased function? His organizational system is actually better than our current one. Maintenance is taking notes. Commandant Thress made a sound like a deflating balloon. I need to sit down. You're in a mobility scooter. I need to sit down more. Medical Officer Nira was composing her official report, which she'd decided to title, Humans, a Case Study in Evolutionary Overachievement. It was part scientific analysis, part existential crisis, and part warning label for future Academy staff. Key findings included, humans possess approximately 3 times the endurance capacity of the average galactic species. Human neurochemistry actively rewards sustained physical suffering, creating a positive feedback loop of insanity. Humans view challenges not as obstacles but as things to try, which explained so much about their history of exploration, warfare, and extreme sports. Human culture actively celebrates endurance suffering through events with names like Death Race and Tough Mudder, which were apparently considered fun. The report concluded with a recommendation that all future trials involving humans include significantly extended timeframes and possibly actual danger, because simulated difficulty was apparently adorable to them. She sent the report to Commandant Thress, who read it, let out a sound like a computer achieving consciousness and immediately regretting it, and forwarded it to Earth's military liaison with a message that simply read, Why? The response came back within minutes. Because someone has to chase down the antelope. Might as well be us. Also, Webb is one of our slower candidates. We sent him because we thought he'd be less intimidating. Our apologies. Thress read this message 3 times, hoping it would change. It did not. Slower candidates, Thress said aloud. They sent us their slower candidates. Hour 68 brought the final official challenge, a cognitive assessment that required complex mathematical calculations, spatial reasoning, and memory recall. It was designed to be administered when cadets were at their absolute lowest, barely functional, running on fumes. Marcus sat down at the testing station, cracked his knuckles in that disturbing way of his, and said, All right, let's do this. He completed the assessment in 37 minutes, perfect score. The testing proctor who'd administered this assessment for 15 years just stared at the results. How? She asked, more to the universe than to Marcus. How is this possible? Oh, I actually feel pretty good right now, Marcus said. Got my second wind around hour 50. You know how it is with endurance stuff. First 30 hours are rough, then your body adapts. Basic physiology. Basic physiology, she repeated. Yeah, you know. Metabolic switching, hormonal regulation, all that jazz. Marcus stood, stretched, and several joints popped in sequence like bubble wrap. Anyway, how much longer? I'm getting excited for that finish line meal. 4 hours. Nice, so basically a quick morning run. I got this. He jogged out, leaving the proctor to contemplate a career change. Hour 70 arrived with a sense of inevitability, like watching a natural disaster in slow motion. You knew it was coming. You couldn't stop it. You just had to witness it and deal with the aftermath. The Academy staff had gathered in the monitoring station, not because they needed to, but because at this point it felt like they were all in this together. A shared trauma. A collective experience of watching their understanding of physical limits get casually demolished by a cheerful human who wanted sandwiches. Hour 70, Vrel announced, his voice hollow. 2 hours remaining. Has anyone told him he's won? Asked Jix. Like he's objectively won. He's destroyed every record, exceeded every expectation. Can we just call it now? The trial is 72 hours, Thress said. If we end it early, even for a victory, it sets a precedent. The precedent being that we have mercy. The precedent being that we admit defeat. On the monitors, Marcus was doing cool-down stretches. Actual cool-down stretches like he was wrapping up a normal workout. His form was textbook perfect. which made sense given that his muscle memory was apparently unaffected by 70 hours of continuous activity. A message came through from Earth's liaison. Thress opened it with the enthusiasm of someone opening a bill. It read, "Heard Webb is still going strong, not surprised. For context, our basic military training involves 12 weeks of sustained physical and mental challenges, culminating in a 72-hour final exercise. Webb completed that 2 years ago. He's been training since. What you're seeing is a human operating at maybe 60% capacity. Again, our apologies for any distress this causes. If it helps, he probably thinks he's making friends." Thress forwarded this message to every staff member present. The silence that followed was the kind that usually preceded either enlightenment or total psychological collapse. 60%, Nira said finally. "This is 60%. I need to retire," Vrel said. "Effective immediately. I'll go live on an agricultural world. Grow plants. Plants don't jog." "What happens," Krell asked, "when the other 14 humans arrive if they're faster than Webb?" Nobody wanted to answer that question. Hour 71 brought an unexpected visitor, Krieg, the Bronthal cadet who'd dropped out at hour 22. He'd recovered enough to walk barely and had insisted on coming to the monitoring station. "I need to see," Krieg said, leaning heavily on his support frame. "I need to see him finish." They made room and Krieg watched the monitors in silence. Marcus was currently jogging laps around the perimeter because apparently the final hour wasn't cooled down enough and he needed extra movement. "He's not even limping," Krieg said, his voice full of wonder and horror. "My people conquered 12 systems. We're warriors, we're strong, and he's not even limping." "Different kind of strong," Nira offered. "No," Krieg said. "No, this is the same kind of strong. This is the kind of strong that wins wars. Not by hitting harder, but by never stopping. By just keeping going when everyone else has fallen. My ancestors were wrong. They thought strength was about the first strike. But humans know that strength is about the last step, the one you take when everyone else has quit." It was possibly the most profound thing anyone had said in the last 71 hours. "Are humans going to conquer the galaxy?" Jix asked, voicing the question several people were thinking but nobody wanted to ask. "No," Thress said. "I've studied their history. They fight each other more than they fight others. They're too busy challenging themselves to bother conquering others, which is good for us and deeply concerning from a psychological standpoint." Hour 72 arrived like the end of a particularly long and emotionally complicated relationship. Marcus crossed the final checkpoint, rang the completion bell, and stopped his timer. 72 hours, 15 minutes, and 33 seconds. The 15 minutes and 33 seconds were from his bonus laps. The monitoring station erupted in applause, which was part celebration, part relief, and part PTSD response. Marcus looked up at the cameras and smiled. "That was fun. Really good course design. Challenging, but fair. When's the next one?" Instructor Vrel made a sound like a dying computer. "There isn't a next one," Commandant Thress said over the speakers. "You've completed the Academy's Ultimate Endurance Challenge. Congratulations, Cadet Webb." "Oh, cool. So like this was it? The big final challenge?" "Yes." "Neat. Hey, question though. Do you guys have a running club or something? Because I'm gonna need to keep my cardio up and it'd be cool to run with other people." The silence that followed could have swallowed stars. "We'll look into it," Thress said finally, making a note to create a running club specifically so humans had something to do that didn't involve destroying everyone's confidence. Marcus jogged toward the medical bay for his post-trial checkup, passing Krieg on the way. "Hey man," Marcus said, giving Krieg a friendly pat that the Bronthal barely felt through his exhaustion. "Good effort out there. You made it way further than you thought you would, right? That's growth. That's what matters." Krieg watched him go, then turned to the nearest staff member. "Does he know he's terrifying?" "We don't think so." "That's even worse." The award ceremony was held 3 days later, which was how long it took for most of the Academy to process what had happened, and for the medical staff to clear Marcus for public appearance. Not because he was injured, he was fine, but because Nira insisted on running every test known to science just to make sure he was actually real, and not some kind of endurance hallucination they'd all collectively experienced. The ceremony was held in the Grand Hall, which could hold 3,000 beings and was currently packed beyond capacity. Word had spread about the human who jogged through the endurance protocol while humming, and everyone wanted to see him. Marcus stood on stage in his dress uniform, looking slightly uncomfortable with all the attention. He'd spent the last 3 days sleeping, eating approximately 12,000 calories and receiving messages from concerned cadets asking if he was all right. He'd responded to each one with cheerful reassurances and offered to help them train for next year's trial. The offers had been politely declined, very politely, with the kind of politeness that came from genuine fear. Instructor Varel stepped up to present the award, his carapace polished for the occasion, his mandibles clicking in what might have been pride or possibly resignation to humanity's existence. Cadet Marcus Webb, Varel began, his voice amplified across the hall. In the 73-year history of the endurance protocol, no cadet has ever completed the trial with such efficiency, such consistency, and such— He paused, searching for the word, enthusiasm. You have not only passed the trial, you have redefined what we consider possible. Applause filled the hall. Marcus smiled and waved, still not quite grasping why everyone was making such a big deal about this. You have demonstrated that limits, Varel continued, are often merely suggestions, that endurance is not just physical but mental, and that sometimes the most challenging thing is not the trial itself, but watching someone else make it look easy. More applause. Several cadets who'd dropped out were clapping extra hard, partly in respect and partly in relief that they weren't being compared to Marcus anymore. It is my honor, Varel said, holding up the medal that represented completion of the endurance protocol, to present you with this award and to inform you that you have set the new Academy record, 72 hours, 15 minutes, 33 seconds, with bonus laps. He placed the medal around Marcus's neck, and the hall erupted in cheers. Marcus took the microphone, which was a mistake, but nobody realized it until he started speaking. Hey everyone, he said, his voice friendly and casual. Thanks for this. It means a lot. I just want to say that the trial was really well designed. Great challenge, good variety of obstacles. Really tested a lot of different skills. I had fun. Several beings in the audience made distressed sounds. And I know some of you are worried about next year, or about future humans coming through the program. But honestly, you all did great. Everyone who participated pushed themselves. That's what matters. It's not about being the best, it's about being better than you were yesterday. Personal growth and all that. He smiled, completely unaware that his motivational speech was having the opposite effect on people who'd spent 3 days recovering from attempting what he considered a good workout. Also, Marcus added, shout out to the maintenance crew. Your equipment organization system was pretty good, but I made a few adjustments that should help with efficiency. Let me know if you need help implementing them. Commandant Thress, sitting in the front row, put his optical sensors in his manipulator appendages, which was the Zarif equivalent of a facepalm. The ceremony concluded with traditional refreshments, which Marcus approached with the kind of enthusiasm he'd shown for the entire trial. He loaded a plate with approximately 4,000 calories of various foods and started chatting with other cadets. Krieg approached him cautiously, still moving carefully from the trial's aftermath. Webb, Krieg said formally, I wanted to apologize for doubting you. What? Dude, no need. You were great out there. Made it 22 hours. That's almost a full day. Nothing to apologize for. My species prides itself on strength. On being warriors, and you showed me that strength comes in forms we never considered. Marcus paused mid-bite of something that might have been a sandwich. That's really nice, man. Thanks. Hey, want to train together sometime? I'm thinking about putting together a workout group. Casual stuff, nothing too intense. Maybe just some light cardio and strength work. Krieg's face went through several expressions, cycling between honor, terror, and what might have been mild nausea. I will consider your offer. Cool. Let me know. Across the hall, the academy staff had gathered in what could only be described as a support group. How do we prepare for the next group? Nira asked, her scales cycling through colors associated with anxiety. We can't, Varel said simply. We just have to accept that our understanding of normal is going to be constantly challenged. The humans sent us their slow candidate, Thress reminded everyone. Their slow candidate just broke every record we have. What happens when the fast ones arrive? We document everything, Krell suggested, Turn this into a learning experience. Study human psychology, human physiology, human training methods. Maybe we can learn something. Or, Vrel said, we can just accept that some species evolved on death worlds where survival required the ability to chase prey until it died of exhaustion, and those species are going to be really, really good at not stopping. That's terrifying. Yes. A message came through to Thress's datapad. He opened it, read it, and made a sound like hydraulics failing. What? Nira asked. Message from Earth Command. The next group of exchange cadets has been selected. 15 humans as expected. The message includes their training records and… Thress trailed off. And what? And a note that says, we're sending our marathon team. They've been practicing. Sorry in advance. The group fell silent. Marathon team, Vrel repeated. They have teams specifically for running long distances. Apparently. Why? Because they're humans, Nira said, and they think suffering is a competitive sport. Somewhere in the hall, Marcus was explaining to a group of fascinated and horrified cadets about something called a triathlon, which involved swimming, cycling, and running, all in sequence, for fun. And the Ironman distance, Marcus was saying enthusiastically, is like 2.4 miles swimming, 12 miles cycling, and then a full marathon, 26.2 miles running. It's awesome. Takes most people around 12 hours, but the pros can do it in 8. Why? Asked Pip, who'd recovered enough to attend but looked like he'd aged several years. Why would anyone do that? To see if they can, Marcus said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Plus, you get a really cool medal at the end. You people are insane, Pip said. Yeah, probably, Marcus agreed cheerfully. But it's fun insane, you know. 3 months later, the new human exchange cadets arrived. They came off the transport ship jogging in place, excited about the academy facilities, and asking about local running trails. Within an hour, they'd organized a morning workout group. Within a day, they'd mapped out a 10-kilometer route around the academy grounds. Within a week, they'd set up a training schedule that made the academy staff's eyes water just reading it. Marcus greeted them like long-lost friends, immediately joining their runs and chatting about training techniques and race strategies, and something called negative splits, that nobody else understood, but sounded ominous. Instructor Vrel watched from his office window as 15 humans jogged past, moving in formation, their breathing synchronized, their pace steady, and sustainable and deeply, profoundly wrong according to everything he knew about exercise physiology. I should have retired, he said to nobody in particular. Medical Officer Nira appeared at his door, holding a datapad. I've been analyzing the new arrivals. Do you want the good news or the bad news? Is there good news? They're very friendly and seem well adjusted. And the bad news? Webb was telling the truth. He's one of their slower runners. The fastest one in the group does marathons in under 2.5 hours, which is apparently very good by human standards. What does that mean for us? It means, Nira said carefully, that when we run the next endurance protocol, we should probably have extra medical staff on standby, not for the humans, for everyone else who's going to have an existential crisis watching them. Vrel nodded slowly. I'm putting in my retirement paperwork today. I'll process it quickly. Thank you. On the training grounds, Marcus was leading a stretching session, showing the new cadets the academy's facilities, and explaining his strategy for the endurance protocol like it was a friendly game rather than the institution's most feared challenge. The key, he was saying, is pacing. Don't go out too hard. Settle into a rhythm. Stay hydrated. And remember, it's just 72 hours. That's 3 days. People do 3-day hiking trips all the time. Same concept, just more structured. The other cadets, a mix of species who'd heard the legends about the human who'd broken the endurance protocol, listened with the kind of attention usually reserved for religious experiences or natural disaster warnings. Are all humans like you? Asked a young Zarif cadet named Thex. Marcus thought about it. Nah, we're all different. Some people like sprinting, some like distance, some prefer swimming or cycling. But yeah, most humans can do some version of endurance stuff. It's kind of our thing, evolutionarily speaking. We used to hunt by just following animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. That's horrifying, Thex said. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But it got us where we are today. Plus now we can do cool stuff like ultramarathons and adventure races. Silver lining. Commandant Thress watched this interaction from the administration building, making notes for the updated training protocols. The notes mostly consisted of phrases like, increase difficulty by factor of 3, add actual danger, and possibly recruit humans as instructors. That last one was both the most logical and most terrifying option. If humans were this good at endurance, why not learn from them? Of course, learning from them meant admitting that they'd somehow evolved a biological cheat code for not stopping, which was humbling. But humbling was better than unprepared. A final message came through from Earth Command, marked for Thress's eyes only. He opened it with trepidation. It read, regarding your concerns about human endurance capabilities, please be advised that the cadets we're sending are enthusiastic but not exceptional by Earth standards. Our military special operations units undergo significantly more challenging training. We selected Academy cadets specifically to avoid intimidation. If you would like to see actual peak human performance, we can arrange a demonstration. Please advise. Thress deleted the message, decided ignorance was bliss, and went to approve Instructor Vrel's retirement paperwork. Some things he decided were better left unknown. On the training grounds, Marcus led the group through a cool-down jog, their pace easy and conversational, discussing everything from xenobiology to what Earth foods they missed most. They looked happy, they looked healthy, they looked like they were having fun. And somewhere in the Academy archives, a note was added to the human species file, written by an anonymous staff member who'd witnessed the endurance protocol incident. Humans evolved on a death world where survival required the ability to simply not stop moving. They developed sophisticated thermoregulation, efficient cardiovascular systems, and neurochemistry that reward sustained suffering. They are friendly, cooperative, and genuinely confused when other species cannot maintain their pace. Consider this when designing challenges. What we consider ultimate, they consider warm-up. What we consider impossible, they consider Tuesday. We are not prepared for humanity. We may never be prepared, but at least they're on our side. Probably. The note was filed under important warnings that nobody will believe until it's too late. And Marcus, completely unaware of the institutional chaos he'd caused, finished his jog, grabbed a protein shake, and started planning next week's training schedule. Because for humans, the challenge wasn't completing impossible trials. The challenge was finding trials impossible enough to be interesting, and that, the galaxy was learning, was the most terrifying thing of all.